Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video I'm going to share with you a simple guideline I used to go about creating a suitable tactic in Football Manager 2023 with reference to a lower league side. I'm using Notts County at the moment, and you can actually apply this principle to any Football Manager game that you're playing regardless of the game that you're running on. I'll cover the step-by-step process in tactic building in relation to the players that you have in your team, and also how those players relate to all the other teams and how your team relates to all the other team in your division. You need to have this in mind. Comparing your team to other teams in the division can help you understand the tactic that you can go about building and how you can go about competing with all the other teams. I like to start with a 4-4-2 like this. It's not going to be the main tactic. It's just to use and fill in the player roles and see who my players are in the team when I go through my squad. And what happened, I remember my very first lower league save in Football Manager. It was at Exeter City, and I had a tactic that looked something like this. It was a downloaded tactic. It's still one of the very best tactics that I've used in Football Manager, but it looks something like this. I had an attacking midfielder where in this position here, and then one central attacking, or one center forward, one attacking midfielder, and then something like this with complete wing backs, not full backs by the way. We had complete wing backs on attack DT, but this tactic I used it with Exeter City, and we're able to get from League 2 as at the time in 2015 to the Premier League and eventually the Champions League and eventually world domination. But one thing really stood out for me. It got to a point that as much as I was winning games, I did not create the tactic myself. So there was still that gap, something missing, that although the tactic was going well for me and my save was going well, I was not the tactic creator, and I wanted to go on to create my own tactics in Football Manager. In 2016, I did go on to try something like that with Stevenage. I tried to create a tactic by myself, but it was terrible. I struggled a lot with Stevenage. I couldn't get good results in my game, so I ended up resigning, and then I continued playing Football Manager and all the other saves, and then I resigned from lower league saves. But in 2017 and indeed 2018, really, I started making headway in creating tactics for lower league teams, and then I was able to start getting good results even in the lower leagues. And although we weren't dominating as much as we did with all the other tactics in Football Manager, all the downloaded tactics that I used, in fact the one downloaded tactic that I used, I wasn't getting heavy results with that. I was still happy, I was still positive, because I was beginning to make headway, beginning to understand tactic building in Football Manager. So why I like to start with the 4-4-2 is to, like I mentioned, help me get an idea about the players that I have, who is going to be my attackers, my midfielders, and my defenders. And also you can see that my players are currently ranked according to their current ability. I like to do this, just filter the players according to their current ability. You can check who's the very best player in your team, and then also do it for potential ability. It can help you understand who your wonder kids are, because if you use the current ability, your wonder kids may not come up because their current ability is not yet up to scratch. So what I like to do is to filter by potential ability and current ability, just see who my main players are. Like I do have Jody Jones here. Is a very good player, good determination, good flair, very good dribbler, and looking at his passing as well, I don't really think, or according to my assistant manager, he's not a very good attacking midfielder like number 10, but I can choose to play him as a number 10 if I want. But he's a good wide player, inside forward, cut inside from both flanks. So you can just use this, try to understand who your players are, who your big boys are, who your other players in the team are, those players that let me say have good strength, good work rate, the players that can actually run the hard yards in your team. Having an understanding of who your players are can also help you go about building your tactic effectively. After going through my squad, it's time to look at my squad in comparison to all the other teams in the league. And then if you go to your squad planner here, you can just see, though it's set to a 4-4-2, but you can go on, you can ask the squad planner to show you all the positions, and then you can have an idea about where you have depth in your team. This can also help you build your formation. And then looking at my right backs, I just have two right backs, both of them are 25. Okay, one is 29, one is the other guy is 25. And then looking at his player ability, crossing not very good, but well, for a right back he can be unsupported here, I guess. And then central defenders, you can see just the players that you have. Central defender on the right, central defender, most of them are going to be the same. Your three central defenders, as you can see, I clicked all of them, it's still the same. Left back, you can do this to all the other positions as well, and see where you have players, see where you don't have players. If you need to sign anybody, you just can actually going through this step by step can also help you determine if you need more signings. And then down to the comparison between your team and all the other teams in the division. And then this is your going into the report column, and then under comparison, that's going to take you here, and then you can see your team's attributes in relation to all the other teams. Currently this is the general tab, so not very much of attributes. And then in all positions you can see how your team decision making, first touch, what's this one, passing, and leadership role. My team is actually very bad at aggression, so an aggressive tactic might not work for us apparently. So if I go on to, by the way, that is looking at players in goalkeeping, defenders, midfielders, and strikers, all those departments. So if I go on check my or looking at unchecking all those positions and then looking at only the strikers, you can see that, well, it's just as bad. My strikers aren't up to scratch. So the aggression of my strikers, sorry, it's not very good. So playing an aggressive style of play might just be negative on us. And then first touch is quite good, so we can be quick with our tempo, we can play with high tempo. And then looking at our midfielders in comparison, you can see that the aggression drops further, but you can uncheck that midfielders' aggression is not very good, but our first touch is quite good. So you can do this for all the other positions as well. In defense, you can see how you compare your players. The acceleration is quite good. So this is leaning towards me playing with a slightly higher defensive line, knowing that my players can go and cover depending on the opposition that I'm playing against. But that's roughly how I go about it. Just go about these positions here. In midfield, you can see that our teamwork is not very good, but we do have good vision, good long shots, good passing, so direct passing could work for us. Technique as well, good free kick takers probably. So that's basically what I do in this section. So after my squad analysis and comparison with all the other teams, I came up with the conclusion that I have a lot of central defenders and not very many fullbacks, or not too many good fullbacks. So what I'm going to do now is to select a system that can allow me to accommodate the players that I have, and a back three system is something that I'm sticking to. And then I'm going to have my wing backs play in this role, and since my wing backs are not that many as well, I do have enough center backs so we can actually cover defensively here. And then I'm going to have my wing backs have some support from the wide players. So as opposed to having a number 10, I'm going to have two central midfielders. I'm going to have a system that has two central midfielders, sorry, and then one attacker and then two wide players. Going deep into the player roles is going to be something that we're going to iterate a lot as the season goes on, because I noticed in Football Manager, especially playing the lower leagues as well, although you can start with one system, the game changes a lot. So you need to have, or you need to design your tactic in a way that you can make tweaks to your tactic and not be confused, because that is also one of the problems I had when I used a downloaded tactic in Football Manager 2015. If my team wasn't playing well, I didn't know how to tweak my tactic to make my team play better. And in recent years, I've gone on to start understanding most of the tactics that I go on to download. So if I download a tactic, I somehow study the tactic and see what the tactic creator is trying to create. And then once that's understood, and then you probably go through the video as well, you probably know how to tweak the tactic to suit your team, and how you can adapt the tactic to probably get more points and win more games throughout the season. So when you're creating a tactic for yourself, it's the same thing. You have to understand how the tactic ties together, so you can go about tweaking your tactic. So we've selected a formation that we're going to use. Now time to see if my players can actually go about playing this formation. From the top, like off the top of my head, I know that they should be able to play, but we're going to try to see who is suitable to actually play this tactic. So we have a player in Jordi Jones, inside forward, inverted winger on the right hand side, but he's a winger on the left hand side. So we can ask him to play as the wide player on the right. We're going to change the rule when we get there. My goalkeeper is going to be Archie Maya. He's going to play as a super keeper on defend, or standard goalkeeper on defend duty. I don't really know the difference till today. But Ruben Rodriguez, I like his name by the way. Okay. But this is another wide player, so you can play as an inside forward inverted winger on the left hand side. I can also use him as a winger on the right hand side, and he's a very good central midfielder as well. And looking at the central midfield position, he can play at a mezzala, so not very defensive. From what I'm seeing, his marking is quite terrible, so you don't really want him to be responsible for any defensive situation. So depending on how the season goes, it's obviously something you can go about tweaking. So we need to have to play as an attacking midfielder on the left hand side. And then John Bostock, he's probably more of my powerful central midfielders. In the marking, just as bad. Advanced playmaker, mezzala, central midfielder. So if I have Bostock play as a central midfielder on the left hand side, notice his player attributes now. This is something I like to do. Where is he? John Bostock has good passing, good penalty taking, good vision, so he's going to be the playmaker in the side. If I'm going to have John Bostock play as a deep line playmaker on support duty, or an advanced playmaker on support duty in central midfield, beside him needs to be a very defensive, powerful player. So that's to combat his creative ability and lack of defensive awareness, because for what I'm seeing, his work rate and marking, not very good. Defensive positioning, there's something like that, I should be able to find it. Positioning is 11, so quite okay. So we're going to have John Bostock play as a deep line playmaker in the central midfield, and then the player beside him has to be very good in defense. So we can see that Mati Palmer is also another playmaker style, Carrilero-ish deep line playmaker, more adventurous, but his marking is somewhat in the range of 8. So I'm going to dig deep and look at all my other players, and then I have a ball playing defender here in Geraldo Bajrami. I also like his name very much. Defensive midfielder, you can play as a halfback and an anchor man, so you just have a mental note as to who your players are. Here's another player, Ed Francis, more box to box. His marking is quite good, so we can have him play beside Bostock as a more defensive option in central midfield. Jim O'Brien is also here. Very good aggression. Here, this is my guy. So as you're going through all the other players on the list, you can then find somebody, although his marking isn't so great, his work rate is 15 and his aggression is 17 as well. So you can have him. Where is he? Jim O'Brien plays. He's going to play as a ball-winning midfielder and then allow Bostock to be a bit more adventurous, be maybe a deep line playmaker or an advanced playmaker on support TT, knowing that somebody here is in Jim O'Brien is going to cover up for him in the central midfield. Now that we have our players on the board, it's time to select our player roles. And then looking at my goalkeeper in Archie Meyer. He's not a very good super keeper at the moment, but he has good determination. His acceleration isn't great, so we're going to need to work on his quickness, obviously. As much as I want to put him as a standard goalkeeper on defensive because he doesn't have the attributes fully yet to be a super keeper, I know that he can become a super keeper with good training. So I'm going to allow him play as a super keeper on defensive and then go about training him for the role. That way he's going to get better. He's currently 21 years of age, so that's probably why I'm going for this instruction. It's probably why I'm going for this player role instead of the standard, as let's say the standard generic goalkeeper. If he was a lot older, there won't be a need for me to use the standard goalkeeper, so I'm going to allow him play as a super keeper on defensive in this role. And then Badrami on the other hand is a ball-playing defender and defensive midfielder, very good as a halfback and an anchor man, defensive midfielder on support duty. But I'm going to need his, let's say, technicality in defense as well, so I'm going to allow him play as a ball-playing defender on defensive. Both my wing backs can play as automatic duty or support duty in this case, but looking at my central defenders, I'm kind of fine with having two central defenders beside the ball playing defender in the central defensive role. And then for Taylor, that's going to be my left back. I can see that Taylor has good crossing. So for a lower league team, 11 crossing is quite good, in case you have no idea. So looking at good crossing for his support role, he has acceleration as well and pace. So I can ask Taylor to play as a wing back on support duty. Let's check attack, just try to be funny about it. First touch, not very good, but his concentration is good, his positioning is good, work rate quite well. Oh, he has very good work rate. So I can ask Joel Taylor now to play as a wing back on attack duty, and then knowing that somebody ahead of him is going to play as a wide inside forward inverted winger. Yes, inside forward inverted winger, cutting inside. So that's going to be a relationship there created already. So I can have him, Rodriguez, that is ahead of Taylor, play as an inside forward to try and drag that space, cut inside and create space for Taylor to get up ahead and try to create chances from wide areas. And then Brindley is the other wing back. Richard Brindley, he's not very, let's say his crossing is just okay, acceleration and strength, pace not very good, so he's not going to be the player. I'm not going to force Brindley to get up and down the pitch, so playing as a wing back on support is just fine. On other occasions, if we're playing a slightly more cautious, more defensive tactic, he's obviously going to play as a wing back on defend duty, and then Taylor is going to play as a wing back on support duty. So for now, wing back on attack on the left and one wing back on support duty on the right. For the other two roles, I'm opting for inverted winger on attack duty for Jones. He's actually going to be my main outlet, my main creator in the side. He's going to be like my star player in the team. I've noticed that, Jody Jones. And then in attack, I'm going to have Longstaff playing this role. At first I thought his name was Longstaff. There's a player I know, Matty Longstaff in Newcastle, but Macaulay Longstaff is the player that we're looking at, and his finishing is quite good, aggression not so much. So if I wanted to play as a pressing, I wanted him to play as a pressing forward on attack duty, although he will be able to play the role. Looking at his 25, he should be able, but then you can see that his aggression is not quite there, and it's something I noticed that pressing forward should be able to have. So throughout the season, I may jump into the pressing forward role once in a while and then see how that works, because he has the acceleration and pace to try and get at the defender really quickly. So something to consider when you're trying to create a player, or when you're trying to create player roles, is to look at the attributes. It really helps a lot. So if you're having a pressing forward now, acceleration and pace is quite good for him. Work rate as well, it may be helpful, so that may counter for his bad aggression, something like that. So if he doesn't have the aggression, he has pace, it's quite fine. So I'm going to leave him as an advanced forward on the TACTIC now. And as for the heart of my midfield, I think this was where we already chose what my players are going to play as. All the other roles, I didn't really put too much thought into them as I did for these two at the beginning of the video. So looking at Bostock, he's going to be obviously my main creator in the side alongside Jones, so he's going to play as a deep line playmaker on support duty starting in this round. Then O'Brien is going to be his protector, much like his bodyguard, like Rodrigo de Paul did for Messi during the World Cup. And then you can have him play as a ball winning midfielder probably on support duty. So now that our player roles has been selected, for the team instructions, I like to go back to the squad planner again and then look at the team's comparison. We did that before briefly, but we're going to just go over it once again, and then you have to do it very often. Every time you sign a player, you're going to need to go over this player comparison section and see how your current team ranks up with the current team in the other division or in your current division as well. So looking at your midfield and attack, looking at what my players have and what they don't have, we do have good technique, good passing, good long range, but looking at there's one attribute that's really poor in my team, and that's something I've noticed. Perhaps it's a physical attribute. Jumping, not very good, so no floated crosses, no excessive high crosses for our team because we may not really win a lot of balls in the air. Looking at our mentality, aggression, yeah, that's the one attribute I noticed that my team is really lacking. Our aggression is quite bad. And then looking at bravery, not so good as well. But we have anticipation, we do have composure, so probably our defensive style is going to be a lot more laid back instead of trying to press the opposition, because I don't think we have the aggression or the bravery to go about doing that. Teamwork, not very good as well. So we're going to, let's say it's just on par really. And looking at our positioning, that's quite good. So trying to have a more laid back rigid system to try and help us anticipate the opposition's move and try to win the ball back in that manner is something that I'm thinking about. Like, obviously, as I go on to sign players in this team, it's going to be very different. These bars are going to be very different, so we can go about changing our style of play then. But looking at our technical attributes, penalties, well, not so good, could need some work. Tackling, quite good as well. So heading, not so good. That's also another mental note. Low crosses is probably going to be our only option because floated crosses, not so much. Jumping and heading are quite low. Corner taking, we're good in that. Good in dribbling and finishing. So that's already given me a mental note as to how I can go about creating my team's tactical instructions. Out of possession, a mid block is quite good, but we're going to turn on one trigger press notch. So it means don't aggressively go on to try and press the opposition for the ball. And in a mid block, it means there's not going to be high press. A standard defensive line is quite good, but then I realized that my players do have they do have some pace, so they can get back. Even so, in case I want to use a slightly higher defensive line with a mid block to try and compress the field and bring all the players together and then have them press more often, is also going to be helpful for my team with a mid block. So that's kind of works well for us. As you remember, counter press is not going to be an option because we don't have the aggression to do that. It's not going to help. It's actually going to cost us a lot more. So we're going to try to probably leave it blank or a group, but for now I'm going to leave it blank. There's no need to actually go in there. We do have good passing and good finishing, also dribbling as well, so we could go for counter or hold our shape depending on any, and both of them would still work because we do have the players to execute both tactics. So counter press, I'm going to leave it on counter, but if that doesn't prove fruitful, if we're losing possession a lot, we're just going to take it off and it won't really matter because it's better to not have it on than to have it on and it's causing you problems. That's what I've noticed in Football Manager. So for my goalkeeper, I do remember that my goalkeeper doesn't have the capacity to start counter attacks on his own, so distributing it quickly, it's not very helpful. So we're going to leave that blank and then probably ask the goalkeeper to play it safe because he doesn't have the eccentricity to actually go and do something fancy like distribute it quickly or hit the ball long or something like that. So distributing to the center backs, because my fullbacks are going to be slightly higher, I kind of trust him to distribute it to the center backs, and if there is a problem, probably take short kicks. But if there is a problem with the way this distribution comes out, then you notice that your center backs are being pressed often, take it off. It's that simple. You don't have to leave it in stone, you don't have to set it in stone. It's supposed to be a dynamic game where you watch everything that is unfolding and go about making those changes as a manager. For my Notts County team, I realized that we have good passing, we have good control of most games. From what I've seen in our attributes, that our players would be able to control the game. It's one thing to know how to do it, it's another thing when during the game you're supposed to actually do it. So that's something you have to be wary of. You need to actually watch your games. And in possession, I'm going to allow my team to play out of defense. I've also asked my goalkeeper to distribute the ball to the center back, so that's something we're going to turn on and we're going to try to hold on to. Passing directness, I don't really touch most of this when I'm playing in the lower leagues. I like to just leave them blank. And then creative freedom as well, not much. I'm going to allow my team to run at the defense this time because we're not pressing the opposition so high. I do expect that there's going to be space behind them when they play out from the back. So when we win possession in the midfield, because we have a mid block right now, running at the defense is going to be an option. We have two wide players and two wing backs as well, so that's something that dribbling a lot more is going to help us in this situation. That's kind of how I'm going to go about creating this tactic. And then one final thing is the crosses. My team does not have good headers, so it's pointless trying to play with floated crosses or whipped crosses in this situation because we're going to lose a lot more than we get those crosses. So playing with low crosses is going to be our only option now. I looked at my players heading. and they're not quite good. We've already seen the comparison. So that's how you go about creating team instructions based on the data that you have in Football Manager on the current players that you have. Now, if you do have the money to go and sign a different player that is taller, you can bring that player in and have him boost the numbers in attack. Let's say I want to sign a different striker from Langstaff and then have him playing there as a taller target forward. That'll boost our numbers in heading and jumping reach, so that can allow us play with a different tactic where you can have hit early crosses and having floated crosses, something like that. Even with low crosses, I think we can still play hit early crosses because our wing backs are quite good at crossing the ball. So that's something to also consider when you're creating tactics. And for the team mentality, I like to leave it on balance, but in game that is going to change a lot. If the team is a team that we can walk over, if it's a match that we can win, we can play with more attacking mentalities. And then if it's also a team that we are trying to be wary of, a team that is much bigger than us, you can go for slightly more cautious defensive mentalities, and then that kind of changes throughout the season. So I like to start with a balanced mentality and pay attention that when you change your team's mentality, it also changes the way your players operate within the tactics. So if I have a positive mentality, let's use Brindley for example. Brindley is a player that is playing as a wing back on support duty, and then you can see that his mentality is currently balanced. So it means he's going to operate not too attacking, not too defensive. He's just going to be on support duty. But if I go on to change my team's mentality to a more positive mentality and go back to Brindley, you can see that he's slightly more attacking than he ought to be now. So you need to be wary that there's nobody covering for him if he's going too far forward. So that's something you need to pay attention to when you're switching mentalities anyhow in Football Manager. And if I go all the way to very attacking, Brindley is going to be like, okay, currently on positive mentality, so he didn't change too much. But just keep that in mind when you're trying to change team mentalities in the game. It's going to affect your players' mentality and how they move. And then Cameron playing as a central defender on defend duty, he's going to be unbalanced when you're playing with an attacking mentality. So it means he's not going to be too defensive. Let's compare him with playing on a central defender defend on a balanced mentality. His mentality is defensive now. So you need to pay attention to this when you're tweaking mentalities and changing player roles. It's helpful sometimes to help you get more wins, but it also kind of affects your team. I need to know what is happening where. So if you found this video useful, remember to leave a like on it and also to subscribe to the channel for more Football Manager videos like this. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.